All right, everybody, we're going to call this workshop to order. Shortly we're going to turn it over to the American Planning Association Community Planning Assistance Team, but Commissioner Arts asked that if she could open the meeting with some words, and I was glad to give her the opportunity. Before you do, I just want to thank you, Lynn. This whole process is brought about through your hard work. You've done this through no cost to local no tax dollars. I mean, and local people put in the money to make it work, but we appreciate that. I'm looking forward to hearing what they have to say, but feel free to kick it off.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I just wanted to start off with some thanks. First, I wanted to thank the American Planning Association for viewing our application favorably and awarding us this technical assistance. And I'd like to thank Tom Bassett, the project manager, for his excellent coordination of this effort. And I don't have enough words to thank the 4 members of the planning team, the 4 technical experts who have donated their time. They've left their busy lives and their families to come here and share their expertise with us for no compensation. So I'm deeply appreciative of that. I'd also like to thank our planning staff, Melissa Corbett and Louis Cerna. They put in a lot of time on this project, including this past weekend, so it was personal time. And I'd also like to thank Tammy Hornbaker for hand-delivering a flyer publicizing the community events to every house in Unit 1 of Wakulla Gardens, and Madeline Carr designed that flyer. I have some people I'd like to thank for their generous donations. First, the Wakulla Springs Lodge was far and away the largest donor. They provided free lodging for this team, both visits. ESG, our public works contractor, I think they're in the back fixing a meal, donated 1 airfare and tonight's meal. Our emergency management director, Scott Nelson, donated 1 airfare. Habitat for Humanity and my fellow commissioners each donated $100 towards airfare, and I'm very appreciative of that. We had 1 local business, Steadabani, also contributed, and 1 county commission candidate, Emily Smith, who also contributed toward airfare. We had a lot of people help out with meals. Shelley Swenson treated for a lunch and provided snacks. Madeline Carr is treating you to lunch tomorrow with some help from Shuri Keeler. And our potluck dinner, we had Shelley Swenson, Tammy Hornbaker, Melissa Corbett, showing off their culinary skills. I'd also like to thank everybody who provided information. A lot of background information was pulled together for this team, and it's really too long a list. Just a few of the high points. Certainly our planning staff, our county administrator, Jessica Welch, Alan Wise with Preble Wish, some of our property appraiser folks, Brad Harvey and Sybil Taylor, health department staff, and Cal Jameson. All were contributing information. And lastly, I would like to thank everyone who took time to meet with this team at the community meetings, during meetings with staff, and everybody who's here at this workshop. So thank you all.
Thank you. All right, and it's my understanding now that we will just turn this over to the APA-CPAT and let y'all take over.
The A plus CPAT. Thank you. Thank you to the Commission. Thank you all for showing up. It's great to have a good turnout. And thank you to everyone that donated to this great effort. So this is the Wakulla Gardens Retrofits Challenge for the Community Planning Assistance Team. My name is Thomas Bassett, and I work at the American Planning Association. And just quickly about my organization, it's an independent, not-for-profit educational organization. We represent 40,000 members in the United States and 85 other countries. It's mostly of planning and related fields, architects and different government employees. We have chapters throughout the states, and our mission is to provide leadership in the development of vital communities by advocating excellence in the community planning, promoting education and citizen empowerment, and providing the tools and and support necessary to meet the challenges of growth and change. So the Community Planning Assistance Team has a history from 1995. It's part of our assistance program, which has many different programs. And this one looks for communities that are lacking the planning resources that can do these type of studies. We focused on post-disaster assistance with Katrina, and there's also it's a competitive process. The communities apply for this assistance. And again, it's not a one-size-fits-all approach. Each community is different, so we take care in understanding each community. The CPAP members here today, Stephanie Tillerson. She is the city manager from Woodruff, South Carolina. She is our team leader. Darren Asper is from Mechanicsburg, Pennsylvania, where he's the senior vice president at Delta Development Corporation. David Berg is coming from Long Island, New York. He is an associate at Cameron Engineering. And Douglas Martin is the deputy city administrator in McHenry, Illinois. And I am based in Washington, D.C. Our methodology for this project was, after we receive applications from around the country, we select the viable projects. Wakulla County was one of those projects. So then myself and Stephanie came for a preliminary visit in May of this year to really refine the project and really solidify the expertise that was needed. From there, we were able to make the team selection from an applicant pool of certified planners that apply to do this type of assistance, so that they would really fit the Wakulla Gardens project. Then we came here on Friday evening, came to Wakulla County on Saturday to do a site visit of Wakulla Gardens, and then we held 2 drop-in public meetings. Some of you we were able to speak with at those 2 meetings over the weekend. And then on Monday and throughout the weekend, we had different stakeholder meetings with various public and private sector representatives. Then we had a couple of days, well, the entire time is intense analysis of the issues. And now here we are to present our findings and preliminary recommendations and discuss with you and continue the discussion with you to culminate in a final report, which will be a much more detailed roadmap for our recommendations into the future. So then, as I said, the public meetings were held at the Pioneer Baptist Church this weekend. We had 2 of them on September 8th and September 9th. There were over 30 community members. We were happy to see that they came out and were able to sit at roundtable discussions and discuss Wakulla Gardens with us. Our stakeholder meetings mostly took place on Monday of this week, or yesterday, excuse me. We had representatives from all these various areas in the county, builders and developers. Most of the commissioners were able to come to talk with us, and county staff and the planning staff, of course, was with us, and representatives from the real estate sector, which is an important aspect of this project. So these are just, broad brush, our impressions of the stakeholders' input. The qualities of Wakulla Gardens is that it is a rural community, but it also has a nice proximity to Tallahassee as well as the coast. There's an affordability aspect that is important to the county. There's lots of pride with this area, and it's located in a very natural setting, lots of protected land and beautiful forest. And so, of course, there's many challenges that we're all here to look at. The roads, of course, are the main one that gets lots of press for the dust and also for the paving issues. There's issues of flood, safety. There's some ideas that we've heard that there's a communication breakdown of information to the residents. There's also high density in this area, which is, as we know, is an overplatted community. Also, the street grid, there's a lack of connectivity to the rest of the county, and sewers and water is an issue, and you can see there's some other issues, and the most important is the funding issue. So now I will turn it over to Stephanie to continue the presentation.
Thank you. I am very excited to be here again. This is a great community. We learned a lot. Our teams, I enjoyed working with everyone. I know that you guys are going to be really excited to hear from David and Darren, because they are the gentlemen that will talk about the infrastructure and funding. Doug and I are going to focus more on the planning issue. The 4 key areas here that you will see tonight is planning, infrastructure, funding, and then a moving forward piece. These are the areas that we're going to touch on briefly. We're going to talk about the planning and zoning observations, transfer of development rights, community development block grant, affordable housing, establishment of a neighborhood group, code enforcement, lot acquisition and land assemblage, and subdivision replanting. From a zoning standpoint, just some of the things, and I'm sure when we talk about some of these things tonight, you guys live in the neighborhood, you guys are aware of a number of the things that we're going to discuss. Planning department, you're aware, but we'd just like to highlight some of these things, and you will find it in greater detail when we provide the final report that will come make available. As we were looking at just from the land use planning aspect of it, I'm sure you guys are aware that the zoning ordinance and your future land use map have some conflict with each other, and just looking at trying to rectify those conflicts, one of the things that we will have and we will discuss further is the possibility of form-based code. You can also feather form-based code out in the rest of in your community. You can it works well in rural areas as well as areas, for instance, like Wakulla Gardens, which is densely populated. So that will be something that we will dive in further in our report. We just didn't want to get into too detail tonight, but we will discuss that in greater detail. Also, we were talking about just some of the principles I had wanted to put down, transportation principles here, anticipate higher fuel costs. We all know that, we all see that. And one of the ideas that is discussed here is really the plan for your future growth, plan for the future growth of Wakulla Gardens as well as your county here as a whole. Explore alternative sources of materials for roads and construction. Manage speed and vehicle miles traveled. I mean, the manage the speed piece is discussed in Wakulla Gardens with the school buses and maybe others at speeding. There's some alternative things that can be placed to help with that. But this is just talking about the enforce the speeds in the residential areas to reduce residential traffic conflicts. And then transportation projects must follow land use policy. I know that's very, historically, that's very difficult. You may have the transportation engineers at the state, and then you have the local planning agencies, and a lot of times those two organizations didn't see eye to eye, and so there might be times that they may plan for a lane or expanding a highway where it may not make sense because you're trying to really keep your community aspect of your community. So here, what I'm talking about here is just looking at, think carefully before concluding that road widening is the only transportation solution. Begin by looking at other modes of transportation. And that's just one of the quick recommendations that I had put there. One thing I wanted to briefly discuss is transfer of development rights here. At our meeting that we had with the community, we're trying to figure out ways in terms of Wakulla Garden to possibly look at reducing the density, and we'll talk more about that and the reasons why we will recommend reducing the density, and looking at ways to compensate current investors or homeowners in Wakulla Garden in terms of transferring their rights to develop there into other areas in Wakulla County. And so here, we'll go in more detail again in the report, but really the end result is that you identify your less developed area as your sending area, which in this instance could be Wakulla Garden, and your receiving area is an area that you're looking for development, which could be right here in Crawfordville area. And then here what I'm just basically saying is that the free market will take care of itself, and this becomes a 100% voluntary program, so that we're not looking at creating any type of takings or anything like that. This is a possibility of something that we feel could be a great asset for developers, and it can work possibly in Wakulla Gardens in this area. Next, I'm sure you're aware, but I just want to talk about the Small Cities Community Development Block Grant. I'm sure you guys are aware that your application deadline is October 1st by 5 p.m. This is money that's basically on the table. This is something I think that Wakulla should definitely apply for. Here, I just kind of listed the funding availability, as you can see from neighborhood revitalization, 8.8 million, and then you can see on down, they have 21 million available on the table. And so this is something that's very important. Now, there are criteria that you have to complete in order to do the application. One is that the area has to be low to moderate income, and you have to do an income survey. So there may be some things that the planning staff may start the process of trying to get out those things and encourage the residents to be as cooperative as possible in getting those income surveys if they have to do that. But that's something that's very important in terms of looking for funding to help with. You can use some of those fundings in regards to land banking. You can use the funding, of course, for housing rehabilitation. There's also grants out there for infrastructure, so there's a number of grant opportunities through the Community Development Block Grant. And I have already went over this in terms of the eligibility requirements, and then we're showing here the infrastructure type of improvements: water and sewer, street, flood and drainage, fire protection, parking and sidewalks. All of those are available through the Community Development Block Grant. NR is Neighborhood Revitalization, CR is Community Revitalization, and ED is Economic Development. So there's different types of opportunities depending on what type of grant funding you're going for in Community Development Block Grant. And then from there, I will go ahead and turn it over to Doug, who will finish up the land use piece before he turns it over to Darren and David.
Thank you, Stephanie. Mr. Chairman, County Commissioners, ladies and gentlemen. And I do want to say I'm very appreciative of the hospitality everyone has shown us while we've been here. I'm going to talk a little bit about the Wakulla Gardens and its benefits to the community, providing the need of affordable housing for low, moderate income individuals, working class individuals, first-time home buyers, or alternatively seniors, people on fixed income. We definitely believe it is an important part of this community in providing all those benefits. Oh, I apologize. Neighborhood association and private. We talked about potentially Wakulla Gardens. One of the issues seemed to be communication, or potentially breakdown in communication. And we talked about potentially Wakulla Gardens establishing an informal neighborhood group. It doesn't have to be a formal legal organization, just something with owners, renters, and a member of the county to keep an ongoing dialogue. It could be staff, elected officials, and this doesn't have to be something where you meet regularly, something that's maybe quarterly, annually, or semi-annually, and potentially have news updates through email, blasts, newsletter, etc. Keep it on. As I was stating, this is just to keep the residents informed of everything going on in Wakulla County, and it could be through email, and does not have to be very frequently. It's just something to maintain a constant dialogue to keep everybody informed.
Better write that down.
Thanks. In addition, the neighborhood association could talk. Residents could document when there's large rain events, where there's flooding, specific roadways that flood or that are impassable for emergency services, or if there needs to be traffic rerouted. And this can be done through a lot of different avenues. One of the ways is you could use your NIXL system through your public safety organization. We use that in our town, and it's for emergency services, but it also is great for informing of last-minute cancellation of meetings, informing people of bad areas of traffic to avoid, and it comes in text messages or email. It's just a quick form of communication to get out to a lot of people instantly. And the last thing I'll say about the neighborhood association, it really is to to maintain contact with the county, not only to provide the updates and issues, but also just to make sure that there's a constant, and I know there has been in the past, flow of communication in case grants are sought or public input is sought, et cetera.
Could you elaborate a little more on the Nixle system? I'm not sure we have that
Sure.
program here already.
I looked it up. I thought I saw it for Wakulla County. It's free to public service agencies. Public safety agencies. And what it is, it's a free service where you can sign up as a resident or a member of the community, and it's usually controlled by your public safety agencies, and they can send alerts out through this Nixle system, they call it.
First 911. Yeah.
In our community, we use it for bad traffic accidents when roads are closed, events are canceled last minute due to weather, stuff like that. It's a good way to get instant communication, and everyone just has to go on a website and log on if the county has a public safety establish it.
It's part of like the reverse 911 program?
Yes, yeah.
What is it, call people? That's how we use it for, is emergencies.
Like when the school says school's canceled, they'll call you a robocall.
Yeah, and this could be through text messages, emails, or however you'd like to set it up. One of the other comments we heard through our meetings was building and zoning code enforcement, realizing the county has very limited staff and cannot do everything. Some of the key issues with enforcement we heard about were enforcement of property maintenance type issues, maybe nuisance type flooding, enforcement of building and zoning codes, just to maintain consistency as the subdivision develops. And I think it's important because the subdivision needs to be developed cohesively because of all the issues that need to be addressed. Septic system requirements, we heard that sometimes it is not consistently enforced, or there's not staff time to do it. So this is just areas of concern we heard regarding code enforcement and building. One recommendation, it's just a preliminary, is to part-time code enforcement inspector. And this can be an hourly person, on-call basis as needed, knowing that the county is basically a complaint-based response system, which my city is too, and we don't have enough people for code enforcement. But a part-time inspector is really a low-cost way, I believe, to do quick inspections on an on-call basis, or 3 to 4 days a week, weekly inspections through the subdivision, just to make sure that everything's consistently enforced.
We have a code enforcement officer. You talking about just for Wakulla Gardens?
No, I'm not talking about one just for Wakulla Gardens. I'm suggesting adding a part-time, but it could be used for Wakulla Gardens because the county has so much land area to cover with limited staff. One of the last things I want to talk about is acquisition of lots and replatting of the subdivision. One of the things for stormwater or sewer infrastructure, or potentially acquiring additional recreation space, you might need to put some lots together, which I know you've talked about with your engineer for stormwater, and potentially even a small recreation area. And one of the things I think I skimmed over was suggesting a community project that where the county has some county-owned lots, potentially using a county-owned lot, coupled with the residents putting in some sweat equity to potentially build a tot lot or playground. It could be a quick thing, relatively inexpensive, that just gets things going, establishing and maintaining goodwill. Lots and replatting, I'm talking about just oftentimes there's a lot of areas in this subdivision that are low, that are in flood zones, or they contain karst features, or even acquisition of abandoned homes or homes that are flooded. I know there's not a lot, but that flood and cannot be built because they always flood. And then providing compensation. The lots obviously can be served for the things I stated. And the replatting statute, and I'm just going to go over this real quickly, in Florida, is just, basically you get an appraisal of the property, and you have to require fee simple title of a number of contiguous lots. Basically, you need everybody's permission you need to control the land you'd like to replat, which often is difficult, but sometimes in subdivisions where there is some open areas, you can make that happen. This is just a specific statute for vacation and annulling of plats, and this is just a quick explanation of replatting and how it works. And then I would just recommend working closely with your county attorney, as it is a complex process.
So if the county said they owned 10 lots together, they could vacate the plat without having to replat? My understanding is if you're going to...
But in order to replat, you'd have to have all the lots you want to replat in common ownership.
But you wouldn't have to replat the entire subdivision?
No, you could do a portion, but you have to have the fee simple title to those lots, and you also can't impact what they call the traveling public. Like, everybody has to have access to their house that's not part of the replatting. You can't impact it that way. So I'm going to turn it over to Darren to talk about infrastructure. Oh, I'm sorry, David.
There's three of us with D names. It's easy to get confused. I also want to thank everybody for being so hospitable. I ate a lot of food in the last few days. Thank you all very much. So I'm going to talk about infrastructure, which I find fascinating, but not everybody does, so bear with me if I get a little too technical. And I also want to say I am not an engineer. I work for engineers. I'm a land use planner and environmental analyst. So don't ask me hard questions. That's what I'm saying. Let's see, that would be this one and this one. I got to talk and operate two buttons. I don't know. So a few words about what we heard in terms of wastewater and what we read in a number of the reports that we were given, and we were given a lot of information. Thank you to everybody for that. I think probably a lot of you know a lot of these things, but I'm just going to reiterate them quickly. There are some parcels, I think they're in Unit 1, that have no public water. And in that particular unit, the issue there is that the on-site wastewater systems can be very close to the wells, and that's an issue, of course, for new development. Low-lying parcels, you had one of your engineers do an analysis of the topography in the 5 units. There obviously, for people that live there, are a lot of low-lying parcels, and the issue there in terms of sewerage is that on-site systems need to be a certain depth above the groundwater in order to operate properly, and there are a number of parcels where that's not the case. The other issue there with low-lying parcels, there are health and environmental concerns in terms of pathogens and nitrogen entering the groundwater. And
David, would you make sure you speak
into the microphone.
Please.
My
When
bad.
you turn around
Okay.
and we can't hear.
Okay.
If it's easier, you can stand on the side of the podium.
It's just weird to have people behind me, but
You can
I'll speak
stand
up.
on this side of the podium and pull the
I
mic.
got to look at this too. It's all very confusing. I have too many buttons and things. All right, I'll just speak this way. Older structures, as we all know, a number of the buildings in the units have been built as much as 50 years ago. What that means in terms of wastewater is that some of those on-site systems may be old, may be inadequate, may not any longer meet code. They may be failing, they may be causing health and environmental concerns. Many of the parcels have their on-site systems in the rear of the parcel, in many cases because of where the well is located, because of plumbing issues. But looking forward to sewering, the issue there is that when sewering happens, if sewering happens, those systems may need to be relocated to the front. So I think I talked about public health concerns with failing systems or poorly maintained systems. Environmental contamination, of course, is something. All the groundwater that the wastewater systems discharge into oh, pardon me. Thank you. All those systems discharge to groundwater, and you've got very sensitive groundwater systems here. It all flows south ultimately to the Gulf, and all that nitrogen's a problem in terms of degrading surface water and in terms of habitat. Next one. So some of the challenges, and there are many. Cost concerns probably rise to the top of this slide and to the community. It is a low to moderate income community with limited resources in terms of funding improvements themselves. So clearly this needs to be a public effort, and state and federal involvement is critical. And of course, the county, where possible, needs to step forward. But I think we realize the county revenues are also limited. So I'm going to talk about a few different types of systems. They're conventional systems, and there was a report done for the county on a conventional treatment system and collection system. The advantage of that, it's, nobody has to worry about it. It's all taken care of, goes to the plant, is treated. It may provide the best treatment option in terms of alternative systems, because you have a single plant with operators that are well-trained, and a single plant in terms of maintenance and upgrades. It's costly, though. It's 21 miles for all of Wakulla Gardens. If you put collection piping under all of those roads, that's a lot of mileage, plus 5 miles to get to the plant, and that's a lot of digging and a lot of pipe. You need other things. You have to upgrade the plant. It doesn't have sufficient capacity today, so that needs to be upgraded. And you need to abandon the systems that are in everybody's yard, and you need to think about how to connect to that public system, and then future maintenance and operations need to be paid for, and typically they're paid for by property owners. And that's probably where the big nut is for the community. It's not so much the capital expense, it's the ongoing annual operation and maintenance. And then there's the impact potentially on density. If everything is sewered in Wakulla Gardens, one could expect that there would be additional construction, which may or may not be a problem. And I'm sorry if there's a lot of stuff here, but for some of the people, this might be interesting, and hopefully for everybody, but my apologies in advance. I'll try to go through it a little more quickly. So conventional collection system, I think I talked about that, and what's needed there. Collection system, another option instead of using the existing plant in Crawfordville is a consideration of a smaller community-sized plant, or perhaps even several small plants, maybe one for each unit. There are advantages there in terms of pumping and piping costs, and operation costs may or may not be advantageous. And then there's a system that is relatively new. It's called a STEP system, and what that involves is utilizing homeowners' existing septic systems, assuming that they're upgraded or up to standards. And because all of those systems already provide treatment, they are working, the ones that are designed and built correctly. So because you have some treatment, you need less treatment at a treatment plant. So it's possible to collect the discharge from everybody's system in their backyard or front yard and send it to some treatment system. And so you've utilized what you already have that way, and you require less in terms of treatment. So it's got a lot of options in that respect. But then what happens, and let me back up just 1 second, the piping collection systems are a lot cheaper. They're on the order of a tenth the cost of conventional gravity sewer collection systems, so there's a big cost savings. But then there are other options for sewage treatment that don't involve conventional treatment plants, and those can be wetland systems, or they can be gravel filtration systems. All of these involve less technology and therefore less expense, and they can work just as effectively as conventional treatment systems. And they can also be modularized, which means that you can size them for what's there today, and then as the community grows, you can add additional modules. So it has those advantages. So what needs to be done going forward in terms of wastewater? The high priority areas for sewering need to be identified. So not every part of Wakulla Gardens necessarily should be sewered. So what areas are the most critical? Probably the ones that are close to groundwater, because if you're close to groundwater, then that waste gets into groundwater faster and with less treatment. So that's a good candidate. Close to surface water for the same reasons. In a flood zone, because the areas that are in flood zones, when they flood, that septic system is not working anymore once it's full of water. Densely populated areas, I believe parts of Unit 1 are more densely populated than some of the others. And then when I say low-income properties, I'm speaking of the whole county in this respect, because large sewering projects should be countywide projects, so one needs to look at the whole county. And is Wakulla Gardens the only area that needs sewering? Maybe not, probably not. So the next step is evaluating alternatives for the collection and treatment options. I put forward some ideas here in terms of other options besides conventional sewage treatment plants and collection systems, but there needs to be a real evaluation of the cost savings, and that's an engineering study, and nobody wants to hear another study, but it is a technical evaluation of, are these other systems feasible for Wakulla Gardens, and what do they cost? What are the potential savings? What areas inside Wakulla Gardens really need to be sewered? Is there a phasing option? That's really another study to look at that, and with a substantial cost savings, then that whole funding option becomes more feasible. And one other item, along with those, where should we sewer? It may be cheaper in certain parts of Wakulla Gardens to acquire properties, undeveloped properties, rather than provide sewering for them. So I think that's another thing. Or isolated, developed properties. It may be best for the community and for the greater community to try to cluster these systems and provide sewering to the more densely populated areas. So just a couple of more thoughts. Some parts of the country, including where I live, are thinking about creating a sewer district for the entire county, meaning if you own property in the county, you're in the sewer district, regardless of whether you're connected to a treatment plant or you have a system in your backyard. Everybody's contributing to the problem, which is nitrogen going into the groundwater and causing degradation of surface waters in your springs, etc. So everybody should contribute. Not the same way, differently, but so that's something that probably should be considered in combining water and sewer into a single authority. We heard that from a couple of folks. It's probably something that should be investigated. And along with that, if you have a single district and everybody's contributing, then everybody can get maintenance, whether you're connected to the system or you have your own backyard system. It needs to be pumped out, maintained, etc. And then, if there is such a thing, or if there's a single district, let's say for Wakulla Gardens or for other parts of the county, there needs to be a formula to figure out what that assessment is, because at the end of the day, the property owner needs to pay part of that, whether it's just the annual operating and maintenance costs or for the capital costs as well. So what should that be based on? It should be based, there should be a base fee, because there's an administrative expense for things like this, even if even if 10% of the properties are developed, there's still that base fee. And then there's a water usage fee. So if you use a lot of water, you're generating a lot more wastewater, so you should probably contribute more, because you're burdening the system more than someone who uses very little water. And that also encourages people to use less water to save on their bill. And the other part of that, I think that's very important, that we see in some places, is the assessment fee is based also on the assessed value of the property. And why is that important? That's important because people with limited means should have less of a burden. So I think that there's a formula there that takes into account all of those things. I'm just going to skip over this next one in the interest of time and talk about roads, which are a lot less complicated. Just pave the road, that's what we heard. But we didn't actually hear that. We heard different opinions about paving the road. And I think what we heard from a lot of people was, yeah, sure, we'd love to have all of our roads paved, but we realize that there are a lot of issues, and perhaps there are roads that are priority roads that could be paved first as resources become available. And I think you're going to talk about that, Darren? Darren's going to talk about that. So we heard about flooding. There's flooding on the roads, there's flooding from the roads, there's flooding even where there's in pretty much throughout the area. But the other important piece of that is that there's really flooding in selected areas. It's not throughout Wakulla Gardens on a regular basis. There are only a handful of homes that actually are impacted by flooding, and the county has already done a very thorough study of flooding and stormwater control. And why do I mention this when I'm really talking about roads? Because when roads are constructed, it's an opportunity to, at the same time, deal with some of the flooding issues by providing roadside ditches. It was very clear that a large number of properties do not have ditches in front of their house for stormwater to roll into. It will roll off the road into the ditch or off the property. So that's certainly something that needs to be looked at. Other roadway issues will be in the report: speeding, connection, things of that sort. Paved roads are certainly important. And I think that what Darren's going to talk about will be, what should the real priorities be there. Whoops. Well, actually, it looks like I'm going to talk about it. 21 miles of roads. The estimate that we got from the 2009 report was over $4 million. Over $4 million to do all of those roads. We looked at the priority roads, which are the main access roads, and a few selected other roads based on input we got from many of you. And that number is probably well under $1 million. So we think that could make that road paving option a lot more likely. I talked about stormwater and the option to put in more roadway ditches. There are very few culverts or pipes under people's driveways, and the reason for that is clear. When a lot of the homes were put in, there were no pipes put under the driveways. I think it's a requirement now for new homes, but it's clearly a problem when it impedes the flow of stormwater from one property to the next. So that's clearly something that needs to be addressed. And the bigger issue, of course, is that there's very little area for stormwater to go. And I mean, you're all aware that there aren't enough basins in the community. But again, the county did a very thorough engineering assessment. It wasn't a design, but it was an assessment of where stormwater storage could go. And what they did there, which I think was a very clever approach, is that they prioritized the entire 5 units of Wakulla Gardens. They said, which are the worst areas, and let's provide relief for the worst areas. So of the 60, they divided up into 60 areas. Of those 60 areas, they identified 6 with the worst problems and provided stormwater storage, piping, and relief for those 6 areas. That was, I'm going to pronounce it wrong, I know, Preble Rish? Did I do that right? Mm-hmm. Yes, okay. Their report had 20 ponds located primarily in 2 of the units that provided for the storage. So we think that that's probably a very high priority, and particularly based on what we heard from all of you, that the flooding is probably the number one problem, at least in certain areas. There was an earlier report, but the subsequent one, this 2011 report, identified quite a few lot acquisitions for these ponds, but it was far fewer than a prior report, which was more inclusive, but probably not what's really necessary right away. And based on what we heard in terms of property costs, these are, I think, with the exception of 2 lots, they were all vacant lots. So the cost there is probably under $500,000 to acquire those. So in terms of next steps, I think I talked about those: ditching and insulation of culverts, pipes under driveways, a real important first step. Some of that can happen with the priority road paving that we would recommend, acquisition of lots for stormwater storage, and then ultimately completion of this stormwater system, which we're led to believe from the consultant would lower the stormwater flooding by about 1.5 feet for a particular size storm, which is substantial. And I'm sorry I spoke so long, but I'm going to turn it over to Darren now. Thank you.
Good afternoon. I will just echo what David said, that we really appreciate the hospitality that we've been shown while we're here in the county. I want to talk a little bit about funding, and the first thing I want to say is that you've done a lot of work here in terms of research, in terms of looking at opportunities. And I just have some general thoughts as someone who works in that arena. Today, as you know, it's a very competitive environment in terms of funding. It's very competitive in terms of local resources, state resources, federal resources. So you really have to prioritize. You really have to look at what your priorities are as you move forward. And just some general thoughts initially. County Capital Improvement Program, we know that exists. Looking at the priorities and the costs and the funding options. What are the private options? What are the opportunities to build public-private partnerships in developing a funding strategy? Local match. We heard a lot from folks that said, we can't afford to pay extra. We can't afford to be taxed more. Some of these grant programs ask for in-kind services, and those are important and critical in terms of moving forward. Another thought is communications. When putting together your grant application, do you have your letters of support in place? And I think it's important for the community, as they're looking at funding, to get those letters of support. How are your state delegation communications? How are your federal communications? And what I threw in here is what I call a county day, working with folks across the country on these sorts of things, where you bring your state and local or state and congressional delegation folks to the county, or you go to them and you show them what your priority projects are, including this particular project, and you talk to them about how you have ideas in terms of funding, and asking them in terms of agency funding how you can get support from them to move a project forward. And the other thing I would point out, and David alluded to it, is phasing. Take small bites. And that's the one thing we looked at in looking at this project, is the costs of doing everything, of paving all the roads, of doing the sewer, and looking at some of the other stormwater issues all at one time. When you look at it, it's a lot, and there's just not a lot of resources out there. So that's why you'll see in our report, and David talked a little bit about it, looking at smaller bites. If we take smaller bites, then we can look at funding resources that are out there to take advantage of. And I can say that working with federal and state grant administration folks, they want you to take smaller bites. They want you to see how you phase out a project and build consensus as you move forward. I'm just going to go through some funding resources. You're familiar with these, the professionals that we talked to, the consultants. The Florida Small Communities Wastewater Facilities Grant, eligibility is based upon per capita income. Match may be secured through the state revolving loan program. I know some of these programs have been looked at. That's an illustration of one particular funding resource. We talked about the state revolving fund in terms of a low-interest loan that can be used for pre-construction. One thing we found out and we talked about in working with the community is there was some mention of the need for an additional emergency service or fire protection substation near the community. And USDA has a great community facilities funding grant and loan program. You can get grants of particular size and low-interest loans that can be used for fire station, public safety facilities, and equipment. And the range of funding, if you look at the awards, can be anything from $10,000 to $3 million as part of once you get higher into the higher numbers, it's part of a grant loan combination. We talked a little bit about some recreation, just a smaller neighborhood recreational facility that could be located in the community. And the Florida program has an opportunity where you can secure up to $200,000 for a grant. And what's interesting about this is if your project is less than $50,000, there is no match requirement. And they also include in-kind services as match. So that is an opportunity to look at, as we talked about, a neighborhood group where you could come together and use sweat equity to qualify as in-kind match to a project. And that can be used for recreation, development, and equipment. In addition to that, the state administers through its funding through the U.S. Department of Interior, the Land, Water, and Conservation Funds program. That requires a dollar per dollar match, and again can be used for equipment and acquisition of recreation, for recreation. One of the things I wanted to talk about that we look at the competitiveness of funding programs and the tough environment that's out there. One unique opportunity you have that is on the horizon because of a very unfortunate situation is the Restore Act. And I know the county has been working on that in terms of how the formula will be put together in terms of what the county gets of those funds. And in looking at that, you know, there could be county designated resources from one particular source of funding from the Restore Act that could be anywhere from $8 million to $30 million for the county. But the key for that is developing the capital improvement plan for the county and also looking at you know, how projects meet the criteria that will be established. I think one thing I would say about that program and that opportunity that came from an unfortunate situation is I would encourage the county and the folks here to look at how you take those funding resources that you would get from Restore and match it up to other local and private resources and other federal and state resources so you can maximize the leveraging that can occur in terms of resources. And I think that's an evolving program, something we're going to hear more about as we go forward. And I know your county commission is working very hard to make sure that this county gets their fair share in terms of funding from that resource. Now I'm going to turn it over to Thomas to talk a little bit about the final report.
Well, thank you to the team and to all of you for coming out tonight. In the next day, we're here for one more day to incorporate a little discussion here and then really compile a final report with specific agenda items and action items for the county to move forward with these recommendations. So we thank all of you again, and if you have any questions, my contact information is there. And now we would like to open it up to the commission and all of you that came today for some questions for the team. Thank you.
And I know there will be a discussion from the board. If there's any citizens who'd like to speak, make sure you fill out a card in advance. Okay, do you have cards out? they're outside in the lobby, and we'll have the opportunity for you to speak up to 2 or 3 minutes.
Are we still supposed to end at 6 o'clock?
That is our goal time to end, so we have to move quick. Randy, you
I would like to suggest to you guys that getting easements between parallel roads to get the stormwater from one place to another, I think has always been one of my pet things. I don't want to go in and ask a property owner that lives there, but anyway, somehow, even if we had 5 feet where you get water, if you have a bowl, a basin, and there's parallel roads, you can't get from here to there because you have to go all the way around the world. But if you had a cross, I think the stormwater plan, I know the one that Hydra did, I think, had identified some of those areas. I got several other things, but we're tight on time, so
Well, 6 o'clock's the goal time. It looks like we're going to run a few minutes over.
Well, we looked at the step system, too. In fact, we looked at a low-pressure sewer system with E1 years ago. Money's always the issue. I think, didn't we impose the AWT standard on ourselves? Would that still apply in this area, even with the septic tank change? Because none of these...
If they have 2 lots, they don't have to.
I know, but I mean, I'm talking about if we did a package plant, say we did a 20,000-gallon package plant, which would be...
We reduce the standard of the main wastewater.
It'd still be very difficult to get residents to agree to have a wastewater plant next door to them. Or even in close proximity. And of course, the gravity sewer is the best answer, but we know we can't afford that. At least not now.
Do you have any other notes that you'd like to touch on? Commissioner Arns?
Okay. If I understood correctly, and what we'll be seeing maybe in the written report is that you talked about taking small bites to look at paving just a few priority roads, doing the critical stormwater basins and the ditches and culverts to reduce the flooding, and then, and if I followed correctly, to just look at sewering some high priority areas. But if you're only going to sewer some subsections of the Wakulla Gardens, that then you would have to use some type of either your own treatment system there, or like the constructed wetlands, or the ones that are underground, the gravel systems or whatever that you talked about. But you said we would need to do a feasibility study, an engineering study, to look at those different options for wastewater treatment. Do you have any estimate for how much we would have to spend to do that feasibility study, and also if there would be funding available to do that feasibility study? But you'll need to come up to the mic, both of you.
In terms of what it costs, I couldn't tell you that. I mean, it depends on how much engineering you want done. If it's a feasibility and a general cost estimate, it shouldn't be a lot of money, because you have a lot of information already done in other studies in terms of projected flows and types of collection systems. So I wouldn't think it would be a big burden. In terms of funding options, the EPA is frequently a good source of funding. I don't know if your state revolving fund issues grants, or is it strictly loans? It's strictly loans for your state water resource and DEP. Do they have programs for wastewater studies? Not so much.
We've probably done 10 wastewater studies over the last few years.
Mm-hmm.
We have a
One more.
complete $500,000 set of plans for gravity sewer for Wakulla Gardens, ready to go, to be turned in.
Right.
That's expensive.
That's the most expensive option, and though it is, and they're, I'm sure, well-engineered plans, it's a very expensive option. So, I don't know. I mean, with limited resources, it might be worth spending, I don't know how much, to look at one more option to see if you can cut the cost in half or less with a non-conventional system.
Luckily, we put the brakes on moving ahead with Bella and the Marty for gravity sewer in Wakulla Gardens.
Right, but I still hear Alan talking about using restore funds to sewer all of Wakulla Gardens, and so it may be worth still at least finding out how much it would cost to do this feasibility study and if we can get assistance for that, and looking at a less expensive, non-conventional option, and then use the restore money for something else. It sounds to me, just looking at your numbers, you were talking about $500,000, I think, for roads, no, 0.8 for roads.
Yep.
And then the stormwater was $500,000.
That was just for the lot acquisition.
Lot
right.
acquisition, and then, so like, for those two things, to at least make an initial effort with some priority roads and stormwater, maybe we're at a couple million. And then if you can come up with a low cost or sewer option, it starts to be doable.
I get one of the things that we talked about was, there's a lot of hope for the restore funds as a solution to a lot of problems, and it very well could be. But I suspect that there'll be a lot of pushing and pulling when it comes to priorities for that money, and it's unlikely that Wakulla Gardens is going to see 100% of whatever comes from those restore funds. So I think it's very important to prioritize, to have at least a lower cost option. It may very well turn out that you have enough money to do the gravity system, and at the end of the day that may be best, but it's more likely that there won't be enough money and that there'll have to be another option on the table. So I guess that's our thought.
I think Mr. Stewart had brought up the option of, after we did didn't you say something after that survey came back that if the 1 cent sales tax passed, I think we all agreed we wanted to go in and pave the main roads like we did in Magnolia Garden. I think that was a big bang for the buck. I think we're all on board with that. It sounds like a lot of things you guys are suggesting we've done. I don't know if you were aware about the sewer standard. We made it to encourage, combining your lots together, so if you do that, you don't have to pay for this $8,000 sewer system. Or septic, I'm sorry.
Yeah, I know about that.
Mr. Stewart? I'm sorry. Well, the road paving, I know that everybody I talked to in Wakulla Gardens, that's, like you said, whoever said it first, was pave the roads. And that's what we'd like to do, but we got to, when I came on board this time as a commissioner, and we all agreed that the emphasis was going to be on stormwater, and we've done study after study. We still haven't got stormwater issue resolved, but I like the train of thought about the small bites, taking a little bit at a time. We got to get more aggressive with the idea of the grants. If we could get in that CDBG cycle again like we used to be, where we could get it every year, then we could probably make some progress and put it all into Wakulla Gardens. But that's not easy. Those numbers you had up there is not money. That's the amount of money they got to give the whole state, divvied up. So we're a small fish in the pond trying to get some of that money. But nonetheless, it's money, and it's for the most part you don't have to match it. And we just got to keep after that. I just want the people in Wakulla Gardens to know that we have done everything that, and I think you guys said that when you briefed us yesterday. What you said to me was that we've done a lot of good things, people working hard trying to do the good things, and the bottom line is the funding, and that's what we keep chasing, is the money. So, but I'm certainly for paving the main arterial roads that we talked about. We got to do that, and we got to keep after the stormwater. I think the stormwater's got to come before anything else we do.
And I think their report is, in terms of what roads to pave, is going to be a little different than what we were first considering as phase one.
And that's fine. I don't care what roads we pave. Quite honestly, I want whatever's going to benefit the most people immediately. That's what I'm concerned with. And if we can gather them on a collector road and get them out to the highway, then let's find what roads those are and do it. And I agree with you. If it's one at a time, if we pave a half a mile this year and a half a mile next year, we've gotten more than we've gotten done all these years.
And that's the way. Currently this year, in our 1 cent sales tax, by the way the public understands that to pave these roads, it have to come out of the 1 cent sales tax. And currently, our 1 cent sales tax is leveraged out. It was leveraged out years ago to pave other roads, so therefore, there is no funds there.
Including MLK Lower Bridge Road.
Yeah, that's right. So the idea that there's funds there, it is not there. Now, next year, one of those loans this year, this coming up year, will be paid off. At that point in time, we have, according to the other leverage that we have to pay out, the other loans that we have to pay out, there's approximately $170,000 in our 5-year plan each year to pave roads. So out of that, and it costs us $200,000 a mile to pave a road. So as you're saying, that's 3/4 of a mile that we can pave every now and then, but also that's over the entire county. So that's $170,000. If we were able to, if that hadn't been leveraged out, you're talking somewhere around $1.1 million a year that you could potentially use for paving of roads, and then you could substantially pave that. But as of right now to 2017, those funds are leveraged out to the large degree. But moving forward, though, the 1 cent sales tax, what it does for us, though, is it allows us to pave roads and allows us to purchase vehicles, because, like I say, that's $1.1 million that is paid for. A lot of that also is paid for by folks that come visit. So therefore, we're going in 2017, hopefully it gets renewed, and then we can continue. We'll plan out a project and then get Wakulla Gardens paved, for sure. There'll be enough funds there.
Some of it.
Some of it.
And we also talked about the next CDBG cycle, taking some money out of weatherization or out of whatever, and instead
right.
of going to
Next year, we're going to do that.
We'll start using that money for sewer and roads.
That's right. And I think the solution, like the step system, I've used the step system as well, and it's a good alternative, but I would think we would probably go with a combination gravity step system and low pressure system to service Wakulla Gulf pieces of it. But like you say, start it out, taking small bites. This entire thing, you have to take small bites out, but we got to plan it out correctly.
I had sent a plat to E1, who manufactures these kind of systems, and a vendor will probably give you an estimate for cost for free.
Oh yeah. Mm-hmm.
I mean, they did it years ago. It's over there somewhere where they went through and sized the pipes. They put in their little computer model, and
we can do it. It's like I say, we got to get started on it, and we looked at it before about forming the CRA, and we need to rethink that and look at that area as well.
I'm looking forward to seeing the final report, and I know one thing that I heard mentioned by Stephanie, and that I guess I feel very strongly too, is that we need to find something, even if it's small, to do soon. Because, as people in Wakulla Gardens are really tired of waiting to see things done. And if even, I know, Stephanie, it wasn't mentioned in your report, but you had thrown around some ideas for how to lower the ISO, and which would save people money on insurance, and okay, and so
that's already in the works, so wasn't it? We've been planning for a long time to put a fire station up the ISO rate in Wakulla Garden. I talked with Scott and Durham
Yes,
about it.
we've had that discussion. In fact, we had it with the fire chiefs last week.
well, I know we've been talking about that.
That's right.
Right, and I don't know what all your suggestions were for how to reduce the ISO, but
His suggestions include some funding.
Well, I think that's what I picked up as funding. That was a good point. We put that down.
We have one citizen who wants to talk, so we want to hear from Ms. Connie Savage. And, yeah. Hey, you put the mic down.
I know y'all said at different times that you can't stop building out there, but I've seen it done in other states and other counties to where temporarily you put a suspension on building, like for builders to go in there and just buy and build like they've done before until we can get it upgraded to a certain point. I've seen Gwinnett County, one of the biggest counties in the state of Georgia, they put suspension on it, and it didn't matter how many building permits you had in line. They only allowed certain buildings, certain areas till they got all their infrastructures up. And then another thing I want to know is, why can't we utilize FSU FAMU, they have all kinds of different classes over there. A lot of their studies could be done a lot cheaper that way, couldn't it?
He's nodding his head.
Instead of you spend all the grant money on studies that don't never get nowhere. I mean, that's the major problem out there. Is every time we get a little money, we got to do a study. Well, time the study's done, the money's gone, and we ain't done nothing.
I couldn't agree more.
Well, but sometimes you need to do the study before you can engineer
Options.
something.
I've seen it in other places, like in Georgia. They'll utilize their universities. I mean, it gets hands-on training for the schools, and sometimes there's grant money that can filter in for them to do some of the work.
Yeah, that part's a good suggestion.
I know this is a larger discussion, but most study I've seen the county pay for tell you something you already know. And it's just,
That's what I'm saying.
This just validates it. Well, I guess we were right. That we do need to pay this
That's
road.
wasting the money.
I agree. I couldn't agree more. That's why I'm anti-study.
Thank you. Do you have any other comments?
Well, just, basically, we've got, places that we could utilize some free services in the county that, and I'm sure some of the schools would be glad to.
Yeah, and I know we've reached out for other programs and different aspects of things we've done in the county to get studies from FSU and FAM. I think Hannah is using them right now with the plan for their incorporation efforts. So.
Well,
I really think we need to figure out if there's not a way there's some way to slow down the building out there until we get some of this in. Because any time you ride around out there, you see more construction going on.
Yeah.
And that's just making the problem bigger.
Okay. Thank you very much. Come speak and then we'll have you fill out a card afterwards. Just make sure you fill out a card for our records.
I'll fill out a card for you. Tim Bozeman, 127 McAllister Road. Speaking of that might be a good idea. Stop all the growth and get everything fixed. But I think we've already proven once you stop the growth, the money will ran out. So, until we get growth coming back, you're not going to have any money. You don't have the revenue to do anything. One thing. The other thing is, and I heard it about 3 times tonight, and I get concerned because when we hear it, then all of a sudden it becomes policy as opposed to what we've thought about and talked about in the past. But I think that over the whole time that we've been discussing this, over the many years, we've kind of determined common sense, and I think even some engineering and discussion with people that see what happens and what goes on. We're not talking so much about culverts. I mean, we're talking probably 10% culverts and 90% ditch blocks. I mean, ditch blocks in front of everybody's houses out there would stop the water from running down the hill. But now all of a sudden it seems like everybody thinks we need to throw a culvert in front of everybody's house. That's just going to push that water right down to that low spot real quick. So let's not all of a sudden think we need culverts every single place, every single house. I've already run into that problem, and it just doesn't make sense.
I agree with Tim on that. In fact, I don't know if y'all remember, Mike, back when I had...
Make sure you fill out your card.
The board actually approved an alternate design for a driveway in Wakulla Gardens that did not have a culvert. It had a ditch block where it would, you had to have a concrete driveway, but it did make a ditch block instead of a culvert.
What is a ditch block?
Something that blocks a ditch.
It stops
Instead of
the
letting
water.
water go through it, it's a dam, basically.
Just holds the water in place and lets it filter.
Once the water reaches a certain level, it overflows the driveway and goes down.
But it would hold the water higher, so instead of going to the low spot, it would go down the side of the road, stop, step over, down.
There's a couple on Lonnie Raker, and there's a couple on Jasper Thomas, I think, if you want to see. Those are made out of stone or rock, but same concept.
Any closing comments from the board?
Yeah, I just wanted to, if you would each look at these were some analyses that were done by the property appraiser and with help from David Edwards also, some analyses looking at subsets. I found them interesting. I don't think we reached the 50% in any of them, but we started to get pretty close. When you looked at homesteaded properties, 46% of people with homesteaded properties wanted the road assessment. we're willing to pay the money to get the roads paved.
Oh, well, just very briefly, David, do we have any idea what LMI percentage there is in Wakulla Gardens? I know in the past CDBG grants, that was a problem. Contrary to what maybe people think, there's not a lot of low-income people living in Wakulla Gardens.
We'd have to do that door-to-door study as required.
Last time that was done, I think, was when Spring Creek Highway was resurfaced.
That's the only way you would have to go door-to-door for that.
Okay.
And I just want to say, I know there's, anti-study kind of view, but I actually think, and I hope other people heard, there are some new ideas here that we haven't heard before, haven't seriously considered. So, we said we wanted to bring this group in with fresh eyes, I'm looking forward to the final report, and I hope that those new ideas will consider further and maybe actually pursue. So, thank you all for that.
Thank you. I appreciate it. Mr. Stewart, do you have any closing comments? All right, thank you all very much. I appreciate it. I enjoyed our meeting yesterday, and I look forward to your final report. Thank you all very much. Thank everybody who come out tonight, and workshop's adjourned.
Yes, thank